Hi, welcome back. Now this video is all about using scrapers for inside of bowls and boxes. So I got this question from a viewer named Gregory, so I hope this helps you out. When using scrapers on inside of bowls, particularly smaller bowls where you can't get tool rest inside, how do you prevent catches and what shape scrapers do I use for inside? Can you show how to use shear scrapers on inside of bowls and boxes? I had a catch the other day which ended up snapping the M2 high-speed steel scraper. It snapped at the tool rest. It was scraping with about 40mm tool overhang. Wood was giddy. So this video, I hope, will help all of you that have the similar situation or similar struggles with using scrapers on the inside of bowls or boxes. So this video will be split into three main chapters. The one will be on cross grain work, the other one will be on the end grain work, but first, now, to use scrapers properly, you have to know a little bit about fundamentals, about grain direction, as well as sort of rules that apply on using standard scrapers. A brief overview of the grain direction. The first one is the most commonly used, let's say, on the lathe, and that is long grain or end grain work. Now, what I mean by that is I have here a block of timber and the grain is running like this, so the straws of the wood are going like this. So if you imagine the roots here or the ground and the canopy on top here, so this is our, let's say, trunk. So when somebody says I've turned this between the centers, or I've used the end grain or long grain orientation on the lathe, that means that they put two end grain, which is this and this part, between the centers. So we are now facing here only at the side grain. The other one, which is more commonly called as cross grain or side grain, is when we have the same block of wood but we rotate it 90 degrees, and now we work at this orientation, and now this is a completely different game plan. Now usually what happens is when you're working on a timber like in this orientation, the techniques and tools, it won't work on an orientation like this, or you have to adapt. So the interesting part when we're working on a cross grain like this, per every revolution we are hitting different type of grain. So if I grab this piece of cross grain, so this is what I usually like a cross grain box, lid or base would look like, or some sort of a bowl. Now if we put this again here, or maybe this will be more visible, you can see the grain direction going like this, and per every revolution we are facing more of the end grain at this stage here, so at this part, a little bit of side grain here, then again mostly end grain, then again side grain, which when we work in this orientation we are mostly facing only side grain or end grain into this. It's really a different type of working properties or different kind of techniques that you have to apply when working with these two different types of grain orientation. Now, so this is cross grain, the grain is running like this, so this was hauled on the lathe like this and we worked on it to rough it out. So again we are facing here a little bit of side grain, mostly end grain, again a little bit of side grain, and again mostly end grain. Here if we go straight in, then it's mostly side grain. So again, if you imagine this block of wood like this, we are now working into side grain like this. Or if we put it between the centers and we work this way, again we are facing the side grain. So that's the two most common or the most important grain orientation that you have to know for any, or these are actually fundamentals that you have to know for all your other cuts on the lathe. And this will, I hope, clarify a little bit, because this implies on gouges or any other tools that we use on the lathe. Now, primarily I use standard scrapers for all of my work here, and these are the most common that I use on inside of bowls or plates, platters as well. So these two are what I call bowl scrapers, and I hope you can notice this one has a little bit more of a shallower curve, and this one has a little bit bigger curve, and it's also a little bit sort of asymmetric curve, like a French curve. So if I bring it here, I hope you can see it a little bit better. So this is for more smaller bowls or boxes, and the steel is 10 mil thick and 25 mil wide. And this one is a little bit more shallower curve for slightly bigger bowls, and you can see here it's a little bit more of a flattish curve, and then it rolls a little bit more here for any of the intricate shape that I want to do on the inside. Again, this one is 10 mil thick, 25 mil wide. Now you don't have to go 10 mil, 8 mil in most cases will work, but these, if you have to overhang the tool rest, these are highly recommended. Now these two behemoth here, these are, if I'm not mistaken, 38 mil wide and 10 mil thick. Now this one, hope you can see, a really shallow curve, and this is great for shallow curves on the plates, platters, gets the job really nicely. And this one here, same dimensions, so 10 mil thickness and 38 mil wide, so it's a really big heavy scraper, but with a bull nose profile. So if I have to go into tighter curves or smaller bowls, sorry, I have this sort of profile that works really well. Although this one doesn't get used all that much, usually for any bowls that I do, these two work really nicely. So just to show you real quick one more time, so this is that with a little bit more of a tighter curve and slightly asymmetric curve, and this one with a slightly shallower curve here. Can be used also, and the other bowl scraper can be used on end grain work as well. Nothing stopping you. I just call these bowl scrapers because I use them primarily for bowls. However, I have smaller. This is 19 mil wide by 6 mil thick, also with a tighter curve, asymmetric curve, French curve, whatever you want to call it, and for smaller boxes, end grain boxes, and this one slightly bigger as well. So again, you can see the profile, and just bring this side by side, and I hope you can see the profiles are similar, and I can, whenever the opportunity needs or want, I can use one of these to get the perfect shape, let's say, or the tool I'm using is the closest to the shape that I wanted to end up. So hope that makes sense. Now real quick off the camera, I'm just going to chew the inside of these two, and we can start to see how we can use the standard scrapers on the inside of a bowl without getting any catches. So what I have here is a half of a really nice pot, and you'll see this in the probably next video and why it's in this condition here. And what I have here is a center line. Hope you can see this here, the pencil line. And what I always want to do is, when I'm using standard scraper, is be slightly above that center line. So I'm always scraping in this area above the center line, especially when you're overhanging. So this is around 80 or 85 mil deep, so quite a big distance between the tool rest, or from the tool rest. So you want this to be slightly above or at the center height, or slightly above it. So that's my, let's say, sweet spot. And so if I approach with a standard scraper like this, and let's say I tilt it up as you always should, so handle is higher than the cutting edge in the front. So if I'm at the center height here and raising the handle slightly, you can see here between the blue line or the crisp blue line, the area that we are scraping, and the top of the scraper here is less than 90 degrees. So if I go further down, now that angle is actually getting closer to 90 degrees, even slightly opening up. So you can have a catch if you go way too down or way too below, depend on the shape that you're scraping on the inside especially. But usually, like I said, I want to be at the center height or slightly above. And if I'm slightly above, and if I raise the handle up, you can see here I'm way less than 90 degrees, and I'm in a safe zone, so I'm sure that the scraper won't catch itself and tear the pot in half, or the bowl. So we have here our walnut bowl. This is quite common that you can see from bowl gouge, let's say, surface. So we have a little steps or burnish marks, which is the length of the bevel on the gouge. You can see here the bevel, and it's almost perfect match to these striations here. So again, the same principle here applies as at the pot. So I'm raising the tool rest slightly. So if I just mark the center line, and that's not quite as visible as I would want, so just mark it again. So the center line is that white dot in the middle, and I'll just make a line across. Hopefully this will show quite nicely. So I raised the rest, so when I position the scraper and raise the handle slightly, so this area is slightly below your end of the handle, and when I go inside the bowl, and this is roughly 60 mil deep, and you can see I am just slightly above the center line. So there is also a common thought that you have to have a dead grip here on the scraper, and it's not the case. Now there is a few things that you have to be aware. If you have an ultra thin bowl and you approach it with the scraper flat, then it has a big chance to explode the bowl. Now this is quite thick here, so it's around 15 mil thickness, and that's plenty for scraping here, the exercise. Now if I'm getting really thin and I want to shear scrape, then I will tilt it up on its side. That's now shear scraping, and what that does, it prevents the standard scraper of feature that it wants to feed itself in. So when we use a standard scraper with a single bevel here, it wants to feed itself in slightly. That's why negative rake scraper has a two angles, and that secondary angle on top prevents it to be a self-feeding tool. Now we can do the same with the standard scraper by tilting it up on its side as a shear scraper. Now it's much less aggressive, and it doesn't want to feed itself into the wood, and it's much safer to scrape if you have a little thinner bowl. And now usually when we shear scrape, then we leave the tool rest like this, but I'm going to show you another trick as well. So I turn on the lathe, and again, I don't have a dead grip here. I don't want my hands preventing the scraper to finesse the curve here. So usually what I do, I just pinch it here, and I'm holding it almost as a pivoting point like this, and now I can control the left and right with my two fingers here, pinching, and with my right hand at the end of the handle I control the swift of the left to right, let's say, motion with the handle. So again, going straight here. Now this is the burr straight from the grinder, which I'm going to change in a few seconds. So nice smooth motion, and it also helps to get nice flowing curve. If you have the scraper with a curve that matches, or it's slightly tighter than the curve you're trying to scrape. That means it's much easier to scrape over the hills and valleys instead of like having a really tight like a rounded scraper. And I can go, like I said, this is quite thick bowl, so I can use it flat on the tool rest and go up to a rim here, but I'm not pushing real hard into the wood. I'm just gliding the scraper on the surface. Now I feel that this burr isn't all that sharp as I would like, so there is a slight, hope you can see here, rougher spot here. So just going to quickly off the camera, I have multiple videos on how I burnish the burr here. A burr here straight from the burnisher, and I'm going to go one more time. So that vibration, high pitching sound, was I was pushing just a little bit too hard on the side wall here. So again, okay, that feels really good, and we'll see slight improvement in the surface here. Major improvement over the burr from the grinder in this case here, and it's, I'm not sure if the camera will pick it up, this slightly rougher spot, and it goes in a sort of a triangle like this, and this triangle here, which is really nice and smooth, is side grain, and this one here, and on this area where we have end grain, this is slightly rougher, and maybe you can hear on the camera. But we can improve on that. To improve on this surface, I can use the standard scraper up on its side, like I said, in a shear scraper mode. Now I'll just drop the rest slightly down, as in this orientation. I hope you can see the center line still here. Now I'm roughly at that stage. I'm still lifting the handle slightly up. Nice and gently. Hope you see that I don't use much force here. There is no need. That feels quite good. And it's yeah, it's much better surface. It's not that rough anymore, although 180 grit will handle this really nicely without any problems. Now there is another point to this. Like I said, all you want to do is have that negative 90 degrees. So if I approach with, like I said, I need to raise the handles, sorry, the tool rest slightly up. So when I tilt the scraper down, it's at center height or slightly above. So this angle of the surface that I'm scraping and the top of the tool here needs to be less than 90 degrees. Now usually for the rim here I like to go in a shear scraper mode, and for the rest, so 2/3 from the rim to the center here to the bottom, I like to use it flat. So it looks something like this. So that's the rim done, and now I can blend all this and that looks quite good. A little hump here, and light touch. With the standard scraper is everything in a really light touch. You don't want to push real hard into the wood. So again, that's the best you can have on this particular timber here. And if I sand it real quick with 180 grit, see most of every imperfection is pretty much gone. A little bit here, I can go in reverse. Find a fresh bit of paper. Pretty much it. A little bit here, but again that will be gone in just a few more seconds with 180 grit, but that's mostly finished. What I have here is a little pear ball, and just to show you with the timber that works a little bit better than this particular walnut. So again, have it tilted down, negative 90 degree. Now in terms of pressure, how much pressure I'm putting on the wood, what I like to think is any pressure that I put on, I want to double it and make it less. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I'm constantly trying to put half of the pressure less on the wood at any given time. So I'm just gliding over any bumps, any imperfections, and that feels okay. A little bump here, like this, and I can shear scrape this portion, again putting as little pressure as possible. I just want that burr to do the job. And I'm probably bumping the camera a little bit, so it will be shaky ride, but that feels really, really nice. Hope you can see that. You don't need to sand this particular wood here, so it's a really nice finish. So key thing to remember is always to have this angle of the surface you're scraping at this area here, and the top of your tool to be less than 90 degrees. So just to exaggerate this, if I place it here, let's say, hope you can see that this angle is way over 90 degrees. So if I would just stick this up in there, so drop the handle down, stick it here, I'll be okay here and here, but once I get to this end grain portion, it will dig in, and I hope you can see how it wants to draw it back on in, and that's the worst case scenario, because once these two points align, so top of your scraper and the grain here, it will just split it like an axe. So on a cross grain work like this, you never stick any blade like this up into the wood. So always have that negative 90 degrees. Cutting tools are slightly different, but with the scrapers, skew. So if negative rake scraper, something like this. I always have one for demo purposes like this. So you can have a big catch with this tool as well. So you just have to drop the handle way down, so the top bevel here is now pointing up into grain. So again, here we are okay, but once the grain aligns at this stage here, it wants to break out. So just be aware how you position on a cross grain work like this. You always have to be aware of that negative 90 degrees. So whenever we are working on the end grain like this, when I say end grain, we hollow the end grain here, and from this line to the opening, so this area here is side grain, and all the way the rest on the inside is pure end grain. Now here we can break the ultimate rule that we have for the cross grain work, like bowls and stuff like that, where we by any means we don't drop the handle, but here we can do that. And the reason for that is at the very center of the blank on the inside, so very dead center, you want to have that negative 90, so raising the handle up, so go through very center. But once you're away from the center, you can start dropping the handle down. And the reason for that, and the reason why you won't have a catch, is first of all, this is a different grain orientation, so the grain is running like this, and it's completely different. So we can sort of scrape the end grain and blend it here to the side grain. On the bowl part, we are actually constantly changing the grain direction, so from side grain, end grain, and it's a completely different beast. And now here, like I said, we can drop the handle, and the reason for that is on a smaller diameter like this. On a really big diameters, you may not be able to do that, but here I can drop the handle, because now the top of the tool here, so I bump the camera, and the surface I'm scraping here is way less than 90 degrees, and I'll have a nice shear angle for the scrape, and you'll see I get a really lovely finish. And again, I'm not here making a lot of force here or anything like that. So first the task is just to get the rough shape, so this will just be a really quick scrape. And now go through the very center. Okay, so removed the majority of, actually there is a little hole still in the center. Okay, so that's much better. So now, again, raise the handle up, go to the very center. Once you find the center, start moving away from the center and start dropping slightly handle down. And you'll see here, I can stick it way down, so handle way down, and you'll see here nothing happens. I'm getting a nice, lovely shear scrape, and just blending everything nicely. Now if you want a little bit more of a shear angle, you can tilt it. Oops, mount the camera again. Tilt it up on the side. Now this scraper is getting dull. This should be now a really nice burr. And again, as I'm approaching the very center, I want to be with the handle higher. And that's almost pristine surface. Just clean up the very center. A little knob. Now just to show you the finish here. So hope you'll be able to see the inside of this maple is really nice. So still a little bit hole in the very center. So, but you can see it's a nice, lovely surface. In this case, I can now use, let's say, this bigger 1-inch scraper, and again, same rules apply here. At the very dead center, you want to have the handle higher. Here you can drop it a little bit. Again, just watch that angle of top of your tool, and the surface you're scraping needs to be less than 90 degrees. So if I lift the handle up, I'm still here. You can see getting lovely shavings, but if I drop the handle down, I get sheer angle. And again, that knob in the very center. And start dropping the handle down. So that's almost perfect. Okay, that feels quite good. Just want to show you the surfaces again. Hope you can see that's really nice. And again, we can just briefly sand it with 180 grit. And that's it. Hope you can see that's, again, pristine surface just with a few seconds of sanding. So again, the major rule that you have to have when you're using a scraper on the inside is that negative 90 degrees. So the surface you are scraping, let's say here the rim, and the top of your scraper needs to be less than 90 degrees. If I drop the handle down, this is now open angle, so over 90 degrees, and this will be major catch at one point here. So it will start to dig in deeper and deeper. So again, on the end grain orientation, where the grain is running like this, you can drop the handle down to get that shear scrape, but you have to be on the lookout that you are in a negative 90 degree angle. On a cross grain orientation like our bowl here, if I do that, in most cases, due to grain orientation, you will at one point align the top of your scraper. If I drop the handle down, even if it's a negative 90 degree, you can still split the bowl due to grain orientation. So, and this is much bigger diameter, so if I drop the handle down and if I go, let's say, to this portion here, that's way over 90 degrees. I hope you can see that, and that will be a major disaster. So everything is in that negative 90 degrees. I hope this little video will help you out in understanding that it's everything in those angles. So with the standard scraper, you have to have that negative 90 degrees to not be in a position that the scraper will catch or trying to dig into the wood. So if you're using something like a negative rake scraper, most of those flaws with the standard scrapers are eliminated by that single bevel on the top. However, I find that the burr doesn't last anything as long as on the standard scraper. So that's why I mostly prefer standard scraper. And also with the proper burr on, with a nice hook on the scraper, on the standard scraper, I get much better or cleaner result in terms of scraping. So that's my opinion. I hope this will clarify that a little bit and help you out on your journey. So thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.